a general discussion about mental health. It is not to be interpreted as specific advice for a specific situation. Every situation is unique and requires advice to be tailored and adapted to that situation. All information in this broadcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional mental health services. If you or a loved one are experiencing mental health distress, please speak to a licensed professional in your area.
It's time to shine that light that lives in you. Living well. It's not too late to change. It's time to be the change. Living well. It's time to shine that light that lives in you. Living well. It's not too late to change. It's time to be the change.
Living well takes a community. So remember to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share with a friend. Welcome to this episode of Living Well. Look, I have a couple of questions for you. Do you ever feel like a fraud? Maybe you feel like you don't belong where you've been placed or where you've been blessed to go. You have gotten the degrees, you have worked really hard, you've put in all the effort, and you are now reaping the benefits of those, but you still feel like maybe I shouldn't be here and people will know. You even know the word of God. You know that you're fearfully and wonderfully made. You know that you're made in his image. You know that he knew you while you were yet formed in your mother's womb, but you still walk around feeling like someday you'll be discovered for the fraud that you think you are. Someday people will realize or recognize that you don't belong in the positions and the places and with the people where you've been placed. Well, if that sounds like you, if we come around and now we're knocking on your front door, or maybe it's a friend or somebody you know, then this episode is for you. So stay tuned to Living Well. All right, so y'all know what time it is. Dr. Nisi and myself are at the water cooler, and when I say we got something good for you today, it's something that most people don't talk about, but many of us experience. You know, you think that you've done all that you need to do to get to where you are, and so there shouldn't be any question when you arrive, but there's often questions that we still have, and if this person who we're about to see on this video has those questions, I don't know where the rest of, you know what? Let's just get to it. Let's watch what our First Lady has to say.
Mrs. Obama, could we quickly touch on imposter syndrome? Because I know it's something you have spoken a little bit about. There was a question from one of our leaders from Indonesia, feeling you're not good enough.
Yeah, how many people, this imposter syndrome, does everybody know what we're talking about when we say imposter? It's like,
I don't really know that term.
Well, particularly for minorities, you know, there's this feeling like because you've been told that you're not good enough, that when you're in a room, you're wondering, well, how did I get here if I've been told I'm not good enough? Women feel it oftentimes because society says you shouldn't be doing that, right? So you feel like an imposter in your own life. You feel like, especially if you've achieved success or you're in rooms that you're not supposed to be in because society has told you that, you think maybe somebody is going to discover that I shouldn't be here, right? That's imposter syndrome. Does that make sense?
It sure does.
So what I tell people is, okay, you know, and all I can do is tell you this because imposter syndrome it's a thing in your head. And, you know, it's just like self-confidence. It's just like, you know, it's like any internal characteristic. Much of it is what you practice telling yourself, you know, and if you've heard that you're not good enough, that's what you're practicing. I'm just here to tell you it is not true. You wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be doing what you're doing if you didn't belong here. And I also have the advantage of, and I say this not with any level of arrogance or lack of humility, but I have been at so many powerful tables now, right? I've been at, you know, I've worked in every sector. You know, I've been a lawyer at a big law firm. I've worked at an academic university, been associate dean. I've been the vice president in community development at a hospital. I've been run a nonprofit organization. I have worked in the government. I worked with the mayor in the city of Chicago. I worked in the Department of Planning and Development. I was First Lady of the United States of America. I've seen these seats. I've served on corporate boards. I've done it, not all, but I've done a lot. And I'm just telling you, there are a lot of people who don't belong there. And every table, I thought it was me. And after a little bit, I was like, nope, it's him. It's this guy who's sitting here talking
But they
all
act
the time.
so well. They act like they belong.
That's because they've been told they belong there. They don't. But there's a presumption. That's what I'm saying. It's in his head too. He's like, I belong here. And I'm like, no, you don't. So all I can tell you is that the person sitting next to you was told, based on nothing, that he belongs there. And you were told that you weren't. Both things are wrong, oftentimes. So what I had to learn to do for myself was age helps you with imposter syndrome. So I'm 55 now, and I've seen it. I've been waiting to be as bad as people told me I would be, I've been waiting for when I was gonna fall and mess up and fail. I've been waiting because that's what they said. I didn't belong at Princeton, right? I applied to Princeton University. My college counselor said, that's school's too much for you. Well, I applied anyway. I got in. I was waiting for it to be hard and for everybody else to be so much smarter. They weren't. They were just told that they belong there. Same thing was true when I applied to Harvard Law School. Maybe I shouldn't be there. Got there, nope. They're not any smarter than me. So with all the practice of just going into the room that you weren't supposed to be in and being there and occupying those seats and just doing you and knowing that your thoughts are just as relevant, your experiences are just as important, your insight is just as valuable, so that you will share it and use it and practice being there. That's the work you have to do if you feel like an imposter, because he isn't giving up his seat easily. He isn't going to just say, oh, I understand you don't feel like you belong here. Well, let me make room for you and sit you down and tell you the things you need to hear. They're not going to do that for you, because a lot of times they don't even want you there, even when they need you there. So you can't count on somebody else giving you the self-confidence. That's not how we work, and that's why you all are important, because you're not going to do that for some kid in your life. You're going to make sure that they never feel like an imposter. You're going to help them practice a different set of messages so they aren't sitting here wondering where they belong in places where we need them. We need women and diverse minds and people who think differently and have different religious beliefs, because truth and the right answer comes from diversity of experiences. You're needed at those tables. So you can't sit there wondering whether you belong, because you'll waste your time in those seats and you'll hold your voice back and you won't be able to make change because you're waiting for somebody to tell you that you belong. I'm telling you, you belong. Practice a different set of messages.
Thank you for saying that. So important.
Well,
She knocked on my door.
girl, she done came all around up in here.
Just open. Here I am. See, Michelle done. Yes.
So this term, imposter syndrome, is really a new term that's being used, but it is, I think, a feeling that many of us have experienced for a long time throughout our careers, whatever that career is. We just didn't have a name for it.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
oftentimes we feel that we're the only one.
Exactly. The feelings are there.
Yes.
And like you said, not having a name. And so therefore, and when there is a name, most probably don't even want to acknowledge a name because of what it sounds like. But what's really true are the feelings that are underneath it, like, ooh. And it is do I belong? You know, is it enough? And am I enough?
Am I enough?
Am I enough?
Am I
you know,
enough?
am I doing this right? You know, something like, well, I experience I would like that. I do. So I own it.
Most of us, you know, feel that way regardless of what we've achieved. I know I felt that way when I went into graduate school, when I got into my doctoral program, and, you know, I'm walking through the halls not knowing anyone, and I'm like, this little girl from South Central by way of Arkansas, and now I'm sitting in the halls about, in a few years, if I do everything I'm supposed to do, I'm about to become Dr. somebody.
Right.
Like, are they going to find out that I'm not smart enough or experienced enough or, you know, have enough exposure to the world?
Right.
And kind of like Mrs. Obama said, and then I was sitting in the room and I was like, oh, for real? Like, you in here? I mean, you know, I was humble, but I was like, oh, okay, I can keep up. Oh, I can read this book and know what they're talking about. I can go in, but I remember that feeling of, oh, and then I had to kind of recognize within myself and say, no, you belong here. This is the door that God has opened, and everything that you've experienced prepared you for this.
Right.
But I distinctly remember that feeling, and also remember what it felt like when other students would come to me and be like, can I be in your study group?
Wow.
You want to study with me?
Huh? Say, huh?
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly. And some of
Yes.
them I had to say no, but that's another story.
You know, yeah, of course. Similar in that I remember being in the classroom and just listening to other people speak. And I'm like, oh my God, the way she said that. And oh my goodness, like, how did they know that? I remember thinking that there was a young lady who sat in front of me, and I remember looking at her thinking, you know what, this girl's going places. And this was in the very beginning of my program. And so as time went by, then I started thinking, you know, as the years progressed, I was like, but wait, I'm going places too.
Right.
You know, I'm going someplace too. So it is really this idea of looking around and wondering if you really belong. And you do all the things to succeed. You do all the things, you make it, you achieve it, you conquer this thing. And even when it's all said and done, never mind how many late nights you stayed up, never mind how many papers you wrote, never mind how much you missed, you know, in your social life, you've made all these sacrifices that you yourself have said, it's worth it. And after you've done all that, you've earned it, and then say, but am I still enough?
Right, but am I still enough? But you know, when you think about kind of like the personality types, right? Because imposter syndrome really affects people who are like achievement oriented, right? And they are progressing, and oftentimes they are accomplishing things that society might have said, those things people like you don't accomplish.
Right.
And that people like you could be because you're black, because you're a woman,
Right.
because you came from, you know, a poor background or under-resourced community, because you're an immigrant, you know, because you don't speak English, you speak English with an accent. Like there's so many reasons why the world says that you don't belong. And we see in media, and those people who are the heads of Fortune 500 companies are often older white men. And so if you're not that, the things that you see and how we're socialized tells you that you can't become that.
Right.
And that's why representation is so important.
Absolutely.
Being able to see images, mirror images of yourself in these positions. But for those who are kind of achievement oriented, are driven, some might even say type A personality.
Type A personality.
You know, there are certain personality characteristics I think that we carry, right? So we often tend to be perfectionistic.
Yes.
We got to do everything perfect and right, right? We often have learned to work like solo or be an individual.
Yes.
So I don't ask for help. If I ask for help, then that's showing that I'm not smart enough or I'm not good enough because I
Right.
should be able to do it on my own. When you're perfectionistic, if you fail at something or you don't do it correctly the first time, then it's like, oh, see, I'm being discovered.
Right.
I wasn't good
Right,
enough, right?
right.
So there's certain also personality types that may have been formed because of the homes or the neighborhoods that we grew up in, and also again supported by what we see in the media that lend itself to these doubts that come in our head where we start to question whether we are good enough to be in these places.
Absolutely. And it is often that idea of, questioning yourself is often reinforced just even in our daily circles. Like for me, today it's 2022 and sure, I have the degree, have the license, have the education, and yet still there are certain circles that I go in that I still find myself having to quote unquote prove myself. Why? Because, this Black woman, we can't refer to her as doctor. They're psychologists. Oh, no, we can't. And it's so unfortunate because I'm still being reminded of that from time to time, depending on the circle that I move in. So society does, they kind of reinforce that.
And so what do we have to do? I mean, because we might have experienced that and dislike, former First Lady Michelle Obama experienced it, but it didn't stop her. So what is it we have to do? Look in the mirror every day and be like, I belong here.
All day.
And if the door even cracks open, I'm going to walk
Step
on
on
through,
in.
right? Kick it open, walk on through. What do we always say? It's all right to have a little fear, but you can't have fear that stops you
Absolutely.
from walking in your purpose and going through every single door that God has for you.
Absolutely. And you say, what else we have to do? Not only do we have to step through that door, the one thing I also realized, everybody can't go with you.
Oh, everybody can't go.
Everybody can't go.
But that's a topic for another water cooler. We're going to have to talk about that, honey. Because everybody can't go. So I would say the take-home point of this water cooler is it's all right to have a little fear, but you can't let that fear stop you. When that door opens just a little bit, you got to keep on walking, kick that foot through and keep on walking. Remember what God says about you.
Right.
So now we've kind of talked about our own personal experience, but I'm ready to bring in our resident blogger. He has written about this topic. He talks to the people about this topic. He's been on the show. We love having him.
Yeah.
So now what we're going to do is get ready to have our guest come and tell us a little bit about imposter syndrome. Let's go. All right, well, it's time to welcome our resident blogger, J. Patrick Wise. We are so happy to have you. And we had to have you back.
I'm glad to be here.
We had to have you back because you wrote a fabulous blog on the Normalized Help website. And I was like, we got to talk about it. We got to talk about this thing that you have written about, imposter syndrome.
Right.
And that kind of hit home.
Yeah.
Right? It kind of knocked the butt. So tell us about imposter syndrome. Tell us why you felt it was important to kind of talk about that.
Yeah. Like, I think one person who spoke about it in a quote, like really sums it up, and it's Maya Angelou. And she says, I've run a game on everyone and they're going to find me out.
Oh.
Maya Angelou. The most talented, prolific writer, like poet,
Yes.
all the stuff, lived her life feeling like a fraud. Albert Einstein, same thing. People who we attribute to great levels of success, generational talents, throughout the course of their life, they wrestled with this question of, am I good enough? Am I really a fake? What happens if people find out that I'm really not who they think I am? And that internal struggle. And the reason that stirs me up so much is because as believers, it's an affront to our identity in Christ. It's an affront to the image of Christ that's within us. It's an assault on the idea that we're made in the image and likeness of God to live before the world as we are not, as though we're not who God has made us to be.
Right.
So it's important that we lean into that.
Right,
Yeah.
right. It's kind of like this battle between what the world tells me I am and who God says I am.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yes.
Like the word says, that Ephesians 2:10, it says we are masterpieces and that we're created in Christ Jesus to do good works which God ordained beforehand that we should walk in them. So it's this idea that the journey's already set. As long as you keep walking, you're gonna walk into some pretty dope stuff, right? But the thing is, God has like set it out beforehand, living into that truth, living well in that way. Come on with the slogan, right? living well in that way has like ramifications on your identity, and not only the way people see you, but the way you see yourself.
Yeah, and I don't want to say sad, but I think the thing that we have to acknowledge, as you mentioned, Albert Einstein and Maya Angelou, is that if you have these individuals who've accomplished what we've considered in the world, these great things, if they're struggling with it, it's so interesting because many of us regular folks think we're the only one, right? We accomplished some small little, in comparison, some small thing, and then we feel like we're the only ones who are suffering and struggling with this battle of identity, right? Because in our own heads, we're like, you saw the earlier water cooler conversation. I mean, Michelle Obama
Right.
struggles with this.
Yeah.
If Michelle Obama and Maya Angelou can question that sometimes, then maybe I can give myself a little grace. I don't have to lean into the thought, but the fact that the thought comes up is really a testament to my humanness. It's just my humanness.
And the funny thing is about it, like, if you're growing, there's a sense in which you're always gonna feel like an imposter.
That's good. That's good.
You see what I'm saying? Like if your life is stagnant, if you do the same thing, like you wake up, you eat oatmeal, you read your Bible for 15 minutes, you check your email, you go to work, you leave work, you go to the gym, you go to the gym, you go to Target, you go home. If that's your daily routine, 10, 15 years, then it's less likely that you'll feel like an imposter.
Right.
Because you have a full sense of control over every area of your life. But as long as you're growing and improving, there's a sense in which you're always going to feel like an imposter. And maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, I like to think of life in like levels of 10. So in other words, you don't necessarily have to learn how to count to 100. You just need to learn how to count to 10. And then life just stacks on top of that. You're stacking tens, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 11 is just one on the next level. Right? So every time you go to the next level, there's a sense in which you're probably going to feel like an imposter. Like when you get the new job or you get the promotion, it's like, am I really qualified for this?
Right.
Like, what happens if they find out that I don't know what I'm doing?
Yeah, because in some ways, you instead of going to Target, now you're going to Macy's.
Right?
At the end of the day, you end up going to Macy's. It's like, am I supposed to be in Macy's? Because I'm usually at Target every day. Right? So you're asking yourself
That's funny.
question. Right?
Yeah. Remember the first time you got yourself something nice?
Yes.
And you're like, do I deserve this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Going from buying generic store brand
Come on now.
to name brand.
Right.
You know, it's like, oh, I didn't moved on up just a tad bit.
It ain't Cocoa Circles no more. It's Cocoa Puffs. Right. You're not reaching down to get your cereal no more.
Right.
You here now. You're that arm reach.
Yeah.
That is so interesting because you make a good point. In other words, if we continue to do the same thing, then we're not growing.
Right.
And so it sounds like you're saying that with growth comes this idea, this is uncharted territory.
Yeah.
Can I do this?
Yeah.
Am I qualified?
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, okay, if you know that, then it's okay. I'd rather entertain those questions as long as I know I'm moving.
Yeah.
As long as I know I'm moving,
Yeah.
as long as I know I'm growing.
Right.
Then that might help me just settle on into this thing.
Exactly. Like ideally, people most often seem to want their skills to meet the challenge.
Right.
Yes.
And when your skills exceed the challenge, you're bored.
Yeah.
But when the challenge exceeds your skill level, now you feel like a fake. Now you feel like a fraud. But in actuality, that's kind of where your genius kind of starts to come out. Because now you're driving home after a day, and you're like, I didn't know I could do that. You know what I mean? And you're like, I like this. But who are you for real?
Right.
Right.
Is the real question.
Right.
And for our context in our community, who does God say that I am?
Right.
And how do I lean into that and live into that? Because there's a sense in which I'm going to have to remind myself of who I am. Because we're continually bombarded with things that kind of attack or lay in a full frontal assault on our identity, on our image, even within our home.
Right.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And that's what I was going to say. You know, I could talk about like the messages that society gives, you know, you based on your race or your gender or, you know, your income, what neighborhood you came from.
Yeah.
But as you just mentioned, sometimes those messages are coming from your home.
Yeah.
Right.
And so those people who are supposed to love and support you and cheer you on,
Man.
what they're saying about you
Yeah.
and your ability.
Yeah.
And even we talked on other shows about in comparison, you're not as
Right.
smart as your brother.
Right.
Oh, your sister is going to be the one who, and you,
Yeah.
you know. So you carrying those messages, we might get messages even from teachers who compare us to the quote unquote smartest kid in the class.
Yeah.
And then we're
Right.
like, oh, well, we got the C,
Yeah.
you know, they got the A, so I'm not. So all of those things are feeding into us.
Right.
This idea that we're not as good as,
Yeah.
or we're not equipped to go
Right.
or to be. And so
Right.
we have to daily, especially as we become adults and we are trying to achieve certain things, we have to continue to tell ourselves like, those things were not true
Right.
because God says,
Exactly.
right? And that God has created in me a purpose,
Right.
and He has given me everything that I need in order to fulfill that.
That's
Like
it.
those are the
Right.
things that we have to continue to say to ourselves.
That's it.
And even that, I think daily is it's a struggle. It is a daily struggle.
Right.
But I want to go back to, you know, what Dr. Holmes was saying about how we receive these messages like in childhood.
Right.
And then, of course, that carries over into our adulthood.
Yeah.
And then it got me to wondering, like, so we're all dealing with imposter syndrome in some form or fashion.
Right.
But does it all look the same?
That's a great
You know,
question.
are there different types of quote unquote imposter syndrome?
Yeah.
Like, are we all carrying around the same messages? Does
Yeah.
it kind of show up in one way, or are there various ways that this imposter syndrome can look?
Yeah. It makes me think about, like, going back to the Bible, right? Adam and Eve in the garden, when they sin, they hide and they sew these fig leaves together to cover up their most vulnerable part.
Right, right.
And it makes me think about, to your question, to your point, how many of us are walking around with fig leaves on? But we have like these personalized fig leaves. Like one person's fig leaf might be Prada and Gucci. Another person's fig leaf might be a bunch of degrees. Another
yes.
person's fig leaf might be a perceived level of control over how they're over maybe their sexuality or their image in the media. It's like, before you can shame me for acting this way, I'll embrace it and make it an identity and make it an image, and I'll profit off of it. Things of that nature, like the mechanisms, the things that we devise and contrive to like kind of control our image, while at the same time feeling like a fake the whole time. You got to be who you are for real somewhere.
Yeah,
Where exactly?
Right. It's so interesting because as you were saying that, I was thinking about, like, from a psychology perspective,
Yeah.
we talk or a quote unquote diagnosis or label that's very popular now that people are saying and throwing around like Tic Tacs is the word narcissism, or this person is a narcissist, right?
Talk about that.
Right. If I don't like you and what you did, and I don't, then he was a narcissist. That's why you broke up. But right, so
We're gonna need like a part 2 because I got questions. Let's go. Okay.
so that's a term, but in psychology, the actual, I don't even need to get into the definition of narcissism, but the foundation or the inner workings of a true narcissist, not the people who you broke up with because you didn't like them,
Right.
but just the true diagnosis and definition of narcissism, the underlying inner mechanism is actually a fear of being incompetent or not good enough.
Right.
And you talk about those fig leaves.
Yeah.
So in order to compensate for not feeling worthy, not feeling good enough, I actually elevate myself above everyone.
Yeah.
everyone everywhere to mask this true feeling that I have that I'm not good enough and I'm not worthy. So even true narcissism is one of those fig leaves.
Right.
I carry myself like I'm better than all of y'all.
Yeah.
When inside I feel like I am unworthy and I don't belong and I'm not good enough. Like that's the true feeling that a person who has narcissistic personality disorder, that's the true feeling that they have on the inside.
That's
so
amazing.
there are a lot of different ways these fig leaves manifest.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I didn't know that there was a professional diagnosis. That's crazy. That's crazy. Like as you're speaking, I'm thinking of Paul Lawrence Dunbar. We all wear the mask.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
Everybody's walking around with a mask. It's a manufactured version of myself that I present to the world because I don't want to be found out.
Right.
When in actuality, probably one of the best ways to deal with the imposter is to talk about it with other people.
Right.
Because what you'll find out is that a lot of people are dealing with it.
Exactly.
And now the fact that you feel like an imposter, I feel like an imposter. Now that may not necessarily heal it, because it's like if I feel unhealthy, talking about how unhealthy I feel is not going to make me healthy.
Right.
But there's a sense in which we can derive some kind of benefit from like, man, I feel like a fake.
Exactly.
And, you know,
Exactly.
you find a community of people who are doing this thing.
Then you can come together. And it really does, not that we want to normalize this imposter syndrome, but it does give you a sense of normalcy, kind of like what Dr. Holmes was saying earlier. If Michelle Obama and Maya Angelou and some of the greatest people are dealing with this, then you mean little old me? Okay, then maybe I'm not on an island by myself.
Yeah.
Maybe there's not anything wrong with me. Maybe I'm not as flawed and jacked up as I'm telling myself or the messages that I am receiving. It's like, okay, well, wait a minute. If this is maybe, normal for some people, if you will, not that we want to stay in that place, but if it adds a sense of normalcy and you think, okay, then now maybe we can move forward and do something about it. I read a stat the other day that said that 70% of Americans deal with imposter syndrome at some point in their career.
Wow.
And 70%. And I was like, okay, well, thank you, Lord. I'm part of the 70%. Okay. But it is like, okay, this thing is not as isolating as it may sound, although it may feel like that.
Right.
But when you think about growing and there's this idea of, oh, maybe I'm not, good enough, but having to constantly battle that mindset, I think it's very real.
I got kind of two questions. One is, I want to ask y'all, just get your perspective. Like, imposter syndrome kind of despairingly impacts minority communities, underrepresented communities, people of color, as two accomplished, black, brilliant women doctors. Like, y'all are rare. Like, y'all breathing some elite level air. Right, and having a chance to observe like how impactful y'all are, not only here at the church, but just in the community, it's an amazing thing to watch. Has imposter syndrome ever come like, knocking on your door at a certain time?
Wholeheartedly.
Yeah, most definitely. I think we kind of touched on that in the water cooler.
Yeah.
I mean, has it? Is it?
Right.
Right now, hello? Where am I?
Right, is it right?
Why am I
Exactly.
in-
My phone ring is Hello? I'm sending the voicemail. That's funny. That's funny. Right.
Hello. I've said throughout my entire career, I mean, starting with going to graduate school, even though graduate school was always something that I wanted. From the time I was 10, I wanted to be a medical doctor. That's a long story. But so I always knew that I was going to go to graduate school. And of course, life happens. And so my trajectory was not a straight path. It was winding. And I thank God for all the twists and turns because it's made me who I am. But when I was preparing to go to graduate school, I was just like, I don't even think I should fill out the application because they're not going to want me over there.
Wow.
Right? So even then, but thank God that I had family that I called and my brother was like, girl, if you don't send that application in, I was like, just send the application. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
That I called on. And I told God at that point, I said, God, I have fear, but I promise if you open the door, I'm going to walk through it. And that has continued to be my prayer, because this little old girl from Camden, Arkansas, a town of 12,000 people,
Like me.
right? In the big city,
Right.
you know, being blessed to do the things that I have done, I know it's nothing but God. And I'm like, Lord, I don't know nothing about this, because some of these things were not in my sight, but obviously they were in yours. And so I'm going to walk through. So I go into many situations like,
Right.
I don't know, but I'm going to walk in and I'm like, God, give me what you could have for me to say. So that I don't think it has not stopped. And I don't believe that those doubts will stop.
Right.
I think that is so key, what you just said. What you just said was so profound, in that we acknowledge the fear, but you still keep moving.
That's good.
You know, you acknowledge that it's there, but it's like, okay, I'm gonna, keep going.
Right.
And I think that is what constantly has to happen.
Right.
Even for me, it is, okay, here I am,
Yeah.
And you play those messages. Can I? Should I? I'm the kind. Do I have enough practice? Do I have enough practice? I have training, but do I have enough training? I want it to be right. I'm guilty of falling in that lane. However, one of the things that I have learned is that one of the best ways to attack this fear or this mindset, I read, is to get a mentor. And that has helped me.
Right.
This woman right here. Mentor.
See?
When you have a mentor, and I think all of us could use a mentor. It doesn't matter what area of life it's in. Because when we acknowledge that there is value in a mentor, we're saying, I'm open to learn. I'm open to, receive. I'm open to growing, especially someone who has, done it longer, than you have. And for me, that has been extremely helpful.
And
is getting a mentor.
A mentor who has faith, right?
A mentor who has faith and encourage you.
Right, exactly. Because, I'm a believer, she's a believer. So I'm like, God got you here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be the one that's like, girl,
Yes.
A swift kick.
Exactly. In the name of Jesus.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
Kick you in Jesus' name.
And his
That's funny.
name, right.
I do. I agree with that. And
Yeah.
having people who can pray and can see in you when you can't see.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That is so important.
Yeah. Wow.
That
That's
is
people who don't want to pull you down, but rather want to push you forward and see you yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that helps. That also helps to negate some of or thwart off those messages.
Yeah.
That you might be carrying around, or just another way to walk out of that fear, not
Right.
walk in the fear, but to come out of the fear. And I think it's a daily task.
Yeah. And I was going to say, you just made me think of something that I think is important for us to emphasize. Okay. It underscores that you have to be careful of who you allow to feed into or talk into, speak into your life.
True.
Because not everyone is going to be rejoicing at what God is doing in your life. And we have to acknowledge that because of whatever else is going on in them. So they might be the one, girl, I wouldn't try that. So you got to be careful about who you allow to speak into your life. And as the Bible says, you got to learn how to encourage yourself.
Right.
Exactly.
Right?
That's good.
Right? So I think it's important to know. And then the last thing I'll say about that is also, unfortunately, sadly, even, with you mentioned the promotion on the job or whatever it is you're aspiring to do, being well aware that sometimes God clears the slate and everybody can't go with you.
I'm playing the organ.
Everybody can't go. You be like, but Lord, we were friends for 20, 25 years.
Yeah.
And the Lord is like, and I'm moving you.
Yeah.
I'm moving you.
That chapter's closed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
and you have to be sensitive to that. You have to be aware of that.
Yeah.
Because sometimes those messages that you might receive from friendships and relationships and even jobs that you stay in too long may feed into this.
Right.
This is it for me. This is as far as I'm going. I don't deserve something else. They might feed into it. So we got to be ready to let go sometimes.
That's amazing.
That is.
That's amazing. Because you'll stay on a job too long because the imposter in you tells you that you can't do anything
Exactly.
else.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
You'll stay in a relationship.
Oh, ouch, ouch.
I'm gonna get some.
yeah.
I gotta say it. The
Yeah.
water
Yeah.
can wait. You'll stay in a relationship too long, or get into a relationship that's actually not right for you because of your imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can we talk about that?
Because
I don't know
that's
how much
where
time
you're
we got left.
comfortable.
Talk
That's
about
where
that.
you're comfortable.
Yeah.
I think we talked about this the last time.
Yeah.
That is where you are comfortable. And so this imposter syndrome that you have going on, if you stay in this relationship or you stay on that job too long, then the people that you're connected with or interacting with are also feeding into that imposter syndrome. And I was like, okay, they're validating.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
They are validating in some form or fashion this message that you have around your imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
So what do? You stay.
Yeah.
You get comfortable.
Right, because I don't deserve anything else, or
Right.
I don't belong anywhere else, or I can't get anything better. I get,
Right.
I don't deserve a better relationship. No, I'm not, I come from this place, or I weigh this much, or I look like this, so I need to accept whatever is given, even though it doesn't even sit well in my spirit.
Right.
So I'm gonna date and maybe even marry you, and then find some reason to justify it. Well, this is where I'm staying, this is where I'm settling. So imposter syndrome can be very dangerous because it can block you
Yes.
from achieving your true purpose.
Yeah.
It can block you from getting those things that have already been set aside for you.
Yes.
Because now when you say that, and I'm hearing what y'all are saying, I'm hearing imposter syndrome as a stronghold.
Oh, all right. Well, a form of bondage.
Yeah.
Come on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Break every
Absolutely.
chain.
Exactly right. Like if imposter syndrome is a stronghold, and strongholds being those mindsets, mentalities, perspectives that keep us bound to a certain place, a certain way of living, a certain standard of living, a certain level of life, then that's, now you're getting into some demonic stuff. You're getting into, and I know y'all are professional. That's now, like you saying, some stuff got to be broken.
Right.
Some thought processes have to be broken. Like the identity, kind of going back to where we started, like who I am in Christ.
Yes.
My relationship with God has to come into play.
Yeah.
Because now, if the devil can set a ticker in my mind that perpetually reminds me of my inferiority, then I need to reconsider some stuff.
Absolutely.
Because to your point, I'll create environments that affirm that
Yes.
and that support that
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
and perpetuate that. And now I'm on the back end of my life, looking back and like, man, I wasted my life.
Exactly.
It was all because of faulty identity.
Exactly.
And that's where we are reminded in the Word. If we acknowledge and believe that we are who He says we are, I am who God says I am, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, then when the devil starts to play that track, then we have to cast down those thoughts that would exhaust itself against the Word of God.
Yeah.
So we have to say, okay, no. Yeah, this is what's happening in front of me, but God, you said,
Right.
and remind Him what He says about us in His Word.
Yeah.
Daily.
Yeah.
Daily. Exactly.
Daily.
Daily.
Well, one thing that I like to do on the show is kind of give practical tips.
Yeah.
And one thing that when I'm working with clients in the therapy room, something very simple that I tell my clients to do is this kind of reminding yourself daily. Post-it notes. We
Yeah.
all have some
Yes.
Post-it notes
Right.
that we procured from somewhere, right?
Like that.
I know, that's another episode.
Right.
But I tell them, write these messages, who God says you are, who you are in Him, on a Post-it note and put them around your house.
Yeah.
Put them where you will see them. I'll even put one on the center of your steering wheel.
Mm-hmm.
Wherever you're going to see them. Yeah, you could have a notification pop up on your phone, but you
Right.
might not be looking at your phone.
Yeah.
Put one on your bathroom mirror. Put it on your refrigerator. Put it on the little monitor on your computer. These messages, so every time you are looking at somewhere you look, you see, these things that God says you are, because
Right.
He talks about our identity all through the Word.
That's so good.
So, constantly reminding yourself, and it is through the practice of reminding yourself of who He says you are that you'll be able to lift that voice and drown out or begin to smother the voices of the world, right?
Yeah.
Right,
You turn
right.
this one up,
Yeah.
turn
the
that
other
one
one
down.
down.
Yeah, that's
Turn that
good.
one down.
That is so, it's funny actually that you say that because number one is putting it before our eyes, you know, making it visual.
Yeah.
But I remember when I was studying for my licensure to become a psychologist, and I did that very thing. I had Post-its in the bathroom, I had them on the mirror, and instead of Post-its that would talk about the different terminology, because in my head it was like I knew what I knew, but this confidence thing was coming up.
Yeah.
And I posted all these different scriptures about what God says, who God says I am, and all that I could do. And I had to have these visual reminders. And I looked at it every time I opened my eyes on the nightstand. It was in the bathroom brushing my teeth. Literally, I did that at least about 2 weeks, for 2 weeks right before I took my licensing exam.
Wow.
So it works.
I'm like, it works.
Yeah.
It works. And so does this conversation, but we have to bring it to a close.
All good
Unfortunately,
things
we
must
have
come to an
right.
end.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
but we always like to leave you with a resource, right? Something that you can kind of go back to and reference. And so we found a book. You can find this on Amazon. It's by Dr. Valerie Young, and the book is called "The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women: Why Capable People Suffer from Imposter Syndrome and How to Thrive in Spite of It." So check that out on Amazon. Although she's talking about successful women, the kind of strategies and also how she identifies imposter syndrome can apply to anyone, not just women. So J. Patrick Wise, our resident blogger, as always, we are so thankful for you. We love to have you here.
Yeah.
We're really thinking you're going to be a regular, so keep on writing those blogs, and we will keep having you back.
Yes.
Thank you.
Again, thank all of you for tuning in and listening to us this week. It is our prayer for you that until we see you next time, you are living well. For more information and resources, be sure to check us out at normalizehelp.org. And you can always email us at livingwell@faithfamily.org to get a question answered or to tell us a story. You never know, your question might make it to air or be the subject of one of our episodes. See you next week.